8 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the September 2023 edition of the Economic Development and Transportation Subcommittee for the Committee for Dulles. Scott tossed me a big assist and told me I could just turn the floor over to him for the introduction. So thank you, Scott. I appreciate having you here. Anita is one of our chair for the committee, and she's participating virtually. And John Boylan couldn't join us today, but we'll wish him a speedy recovery, and we'll hope to see him next month.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. So this morning, our topic is all about the Coalition to Protect America's Regional Airports, and as well as the controversy going on down in Washington with respect to the proposal to add slots to DCA and eliminate the perimeter rule. I had, well, first, for those who may not know, I serve as the coalition's president. Mike Stewart, who attempted to get on here, is the executive director of Roanoke Regional Airport Commission, and he serves as the coalition's treasurer. Tony Howard, the CEO and president, serves as the secretary for the coalition. So I had asked Adam Broder to come on this morning to share things about the coalition, what it's up to, what the makeup of the membership is, and et cetera, and give us some historical perspective of how we got to where we are and where he sees us going. And we invited also David Mould to join us. He is Vice President of Communications, Government Affairs, and for the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, and asked him to kind of share MWA's perspective on all of this. So with that, Adam Broder is a former political strategist with 15 plus years of experience developing communications and research strategies for companies, political campaigns, nonprofit organizations, and industry associations. As a managing director at FTI Consulting, Adam advises clients across industries on the impact of politics and policy during movements of change and crisis, including government investigations, litigation, mergers and acquisitions, regulatory review, antitrust matters, and competitive positioning. Prior to his work at FTI, Adam was a senior campaign strategist for the Democratic Party, where he serves as research director and strategic communications advisor at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He currently advises the Coalition to Protect America's Regional Airports on campaign management and strategic communications strategy. And so with that, I will turn the time over to Adam. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everybody, for having me here. Let me share my slides. If you can see this. Does this pop up for everybody?
Yep.
There you go.
Got it.
Great. Well, first, thank you, Scott. Thank you for your involvement in CPAR and the coalition, and also for having the Committee for Dulles join as an early and founding member. And it's nice to be here with you all. So Scott asked me to give a little bit of background. I won't go into the issue too deeply. I think you all are familiar with the perimeter rule, but a little bit more into how the coalition formed, what we see sort of our strategic purposes, how we can sort of connect the various elements, and a little bit about where I think we are now that Congress has come back in early September, and where we might go from here. So I had actually worked on the perimeter rule in years past with United Airlines and some others. And at the time, this was made back in 2016 when the issue came up last, it was dealt with, I thought, from reading the news and being involved, as sort of a Virginia issue and a members of Congress who wanted a better ride home issue. And it was sort of seen as that. There were some members from Texas, some just plainly said they were looking for a direct route home from DCA, from Reagan. And then a bit of a focus and a conversation of from the Virginia delegation. That worked in the past, but what I think was very different this year is when a opposing coalition led by some Western state tourism boards and chambers of commerce launched a much larger campaign this year, specifically focusing on how they thought DCA had way more capacity to add dozens of new flights, and that would ultimately bring more flights to, these were members from Nevada and Utah and Texas mainly. And I think that opportunity presented to the early members who would eventually go on to form CPARA the idea to not just focus on this as a Virginia issue. I know I'm speaking to the Committee for Dulles, located in Northern Virginia, but if you'll, allow me, this really is an issue that affects more airports, more local economies, other airlines and airports. And so I think it was, one of the early discussions. I heard one of the members around the table ask, are we the coalition, or what would we name ourselves? And I think it was sort of a strategic choice to really focus on regional airports as a way to say, the perimeter rule is really not just, a Northern Virginia issue. While there's certainly there would be a large effect on economic development in the area in Northern Virginia, that there were impacts on other in-perimeter states. And as you'll hear from David, EMWA had carried this message before and said, hey, for those of you folks in the perimeter, any changes will affect you. But I don't know if that had sort of broken through. So, I say all that because I think the opportunity here, and as you can see, I'm sharing where we are now with all these members, you'll see really a wide, a diversity of groups from various states. I'll dig into our membership in a little bit, but we do have members stretching from Hawaii all the way to Maine, as Scott likes to say. And I think that goes to this idea that for a bigger fight, that needed to be more, pointed, and that was going to actually convince folks that this wasn't just some parochial issue that didn't need to be looked at, and we could just sort of let's just move on with FAA reauthorization. We needed to pull in more folks from around the perimeter, and as you'll see, we have members from inside the perimeter and outside. So I do think this is sort of a different effort, a consciously larger and more inclusive effort to provide the facts and say, how will changes to DCA's slot and perimeter rules really affect local communities? And please, as I'm talking, feel free to interrupt and ask questions. I don't want to just yabber on too long. So, as a representative of the coalition, you all have seen how these fights take place in DC. We see ourselves as the vehicle for pulling together smart research, good messaging, our website as a central location to help reporters understand the facts, and a sort of integrated one mouthpiece to make it easier for folks to understand what's really at risk. And I think in the past, loose coalitions have worked together and also been effective, but as to match the amount of money that the other side was going to spend, and what we saw as facts that did not make sense, and as you'll hear, I imagine from David, that do not reflect the on-the-ground realities at DCA, we needed to have that sort of central messaging organization to be in contact with reporters, with members, with other folks on the ground, and then of course to speak with folks like you. So that's how the coalition came together. And as Scott mentioned, Scott and Mike and Tony helped form the organization of our board. FTI Consulting, where I work, helps run the organization. And we have tried to, raise this debate with good facts. And the true goal is to engage our members, and then our members' membership, to advocate directly to members of Congress. The most important thing I think we do is on our website, we have our Grassroots Action Resource Center, our portal, where anyone can go and fill in their information and send a letter to their member of Congress, their delegation, both in the House and the Senate. And if there's a populated letter for suggestions, that people can edit that to say what they want and to make sure that their voices are being heard. In DC, we find that is one of the most important things for members of Congress to hear directly from their constituents.
Hey, Adam, I have a question. What was so compelling for like Dayton or Memphis or for Illinois Airport Group? What did they find so compelling about the issue now? What have they told you that they really triggered their motivation to join the coalition?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I have done dozens of calls with airport directors. I think it's shifted a little over time. What I would say is, initially, the sort of prevailing message, and one that MWA had carried successfully in fights past, was this idea of your flights are at risk, right? That playing with slots is a zero-sum game. And while some airports said to us, we've done the math, we don't think we're the first, airline necessarily to lose a flight or whatever, as is often said, for in-perimeter airports, they have everything to lose and nothing to gain, because it was, obvious that what the other airlines are trying to do is add more long-haul flights, and that would rejigger everything within the perimeter. And I am no network expert, but even the little bit of schooling that I've had, clearly shows that, as airlines start to prioritize those longer haul, more profitable flights, that changes all the folks who need to come down from, Buffalo and from Richmond and from all smaller airports to be able to fill an international flight, let's say at Dulles. And again, even though as we were trying to expand geographically, I also failed to mention at the beginning, it's not just an argument about DCA, right? This is also something about an argument about Dulles, right? People talk about access to the nation's capital as if DCA were the only airport, but as has often been the case, as we've told people, if a businessman from Buffalo, New York needs to go to Brussels or go over to Frankfurt, I flew to Frankfurt, this summer from Dulles, we need to be able to pull people in. So that's a long way of saying, I think at the beginning it had to do with losing flights. I think as the debate shifted, we all focused on a message of DCA being at capacity. And I think towards I don't want to say the end, but the end of where we are for now, later in this debate, that argument really carried the day. I think for folks who have gone in and out of DCA, they see that, because they see that it's crowded, and I think it's very obvious to see that it's geographically limited. I think the focus that we put on DCA largely having one runway and being the busiest runway in America, that I think it's the one of the highest cancellation rates among the largest airports, that it's I think DCA ranks third amongst the most incursions on runways. We had pulled together all these facts in a way that I think was compelling for folks in DCA. So I would say again, so maybe risk of flights at the beginning, and maybe more at capacity. I think that's also helpful because the other side has tried to argue, again, we can add 56 slots, we can add 20, we can add however many it is, but I think having a clear message supported by the data and supported by the FAA and others that DCA is at capacity is ultimately when we got to the House vote last month, or in July, convinced people that it did not make sense. That answers your question. And I would say that, that might change as we'll get to how I see things, sort of going in the future. That may change, although I do think that capacity, again, as supported by MLAW, the FAA, and other experts, still carries the day. I think that changes a little bit maybe for some Western state senators. We do have members in the West who you would think maybe being beyond the perimeter would not agree with our argument. And yet I think, again, because of the complexity of airline networks, they understand that, well, if you're in Wyoming, you need Colorado to be, and Denver to be a central hub. And I think for folks who have to fly off to smaller locations and who don't have as much regular access, I think that's a pretty compelling message to them.
Thanks.
So moving on just a little bit, here's a little bit of about our membership. We launched at the end of May with 29 members from 6 states in the district. And very quickly, we're able to, with the help of Scott and Emma and our other friends and members who reached out to their contacts, as you can see along the bottom, really grew quickly. We more than doubled in size, I think, in the first week or two, 10 days. By mid-June, we had 88 members. By the House vote, that was July 19th, 130, and we're currently at 156 and continuing to grow, although I think people took some vacations in August, and so we've put membership growth on hold for a little bit, but now I'm excited to get back into contacting others. You've seen that very quick and rapid growth in membership, and I will say, because I'm a competitive person, the other side, the other coalition, they focused just on a few Western states where they thought they could win this argument, and their membership has leveled off. And I think the difference between the two is obvious to members of Congress, that there's sort of one that is really just sort of geographically limited and sort of has a very sort of narrow scope, and our coalition, as you can see, really spreads the map, again, from Hawaii to Maine, in perimeter states, outside perimeter states. Our membership includes 87 chambers of commerce, as you can see there, 30 airports and airport operators, 12 community organizations, industry associations, private companies, and then also a number of tourism boards and other local government organizations. So we are pretty proud of the diverse coalition that we've been able to put together. But again, I think the true sort of strategic piece to this is it allows a diversity of individuals to go directly to their members of Congress and advocate directly. And some people, we talk a lot to colleagues who are, in quiet skies organizations, so maybe they enter this debate from having to deal with noise as their main issue. Maybe airport operators are thinking about potentially losing flights. So there is not just one main argument, and I think that actually also helps as well, right? When people bring sort of their own views about this debate, and it shows again the diversity of the negative effects of what would happen should we have more flights and change the schedule. As you can see, just a few more things about our membership. While we reach really across the country, we do have, just if you're interested, our states with the most members include Illinois, which has 23, Virginia, of course, 43, I think is our state with the most number of members, but also Colorado, again, with 7, Maryland with 8, Mississippi with 7. So there is a real diversity there, again, who bring sort of their own views. In terms of tactical execution, as we were building, we knew that ultimately what the goal here is not just sort of a public debate, but that FAA reauthorization was staring us down. And we have seen how in the past, arguments of the perimeter rule have delayed multiple times and for multiple years passage of reauthorization. And we were in this debate, of course, not in a vacuum. Like I said, we launched at the end of May. There were already stories about what summer travel was going to look like, the highest numbers of flyers since, post-COVID, the shortage in air traffic controllers, obviously, an acting FAA administrator. These were all issues that were swirling around, and we think helped support and sort of provide context for our argument about the perimeter rule. So at a time where there are not enough air traffic controllers, when we are talking about the number of runway incursions at airports, when we're talking about people, missing flights or experiencing delays, I think it helped that there was also a conversation about the airline industry was, coming out of a post-COVID moment, and that doing something so drastic like adding 56 slots to an airport at capacity, right, would affect that negatively. It didn't make any sense. On July 19th, so of course, just for a little bit of process, the House held its markup of the FAA reauthorization bill. There was no language added from that committee vote about the perimeter. And then there was supposed to be a Senate committee markup. And of course, that got postponed and delayed in part due to our issue and other issues about pilot training hours and the such. The House decided to move forward with their bill and not wait for the Senate, as summer recess was staring down the members. As you can see here, on the amendment that would have added more slots, it was defeated with 229 no votes, which 229 to 205, I have to say, as Scott said, I used to work on campaigns and on the Hill, and that's a healthy margin in today's very split and divisive Congress. And while this is not a partisan issue and tends to be more of a geographic issue, I think that was a very strong bipartisan statement from the House that they did not want to add flights, whether it was about concern over losing flights, whether it was concern over DCA, whether it was a concern of FAA reauthorization not happening on a timely manner. Again, I think a diversity of opinions, but a strong vote, and that received a lot of coverage. And again, from the coalition's perspective, we wanted that vote to ring loudly both in DC for senators who would be thinking about this issue and how they should approach it, but also back in the states, because like I said, we have had this real focus on the perimeter issue, not just being a Virginia, DC, sort of Maryland issue, but a real local issue in the states. So, I guess my last slide. Where do we go from here? It's the beginning of September. The House has not scheduled the Senate has not scheduled a markup vote. Given that FAA reauthorization expires at the end of the month, we do expect there to be some extension, although for how long, we don't know. The end of the year, as every end of the year is these days, looks pretty messy, as I'm sure you've seen from the headlines, talks of a government shutdown, budgetary matters. There's a lot swirling around. What does that mean for FAA reauthorization? Well, I think it provides no clarity. And I think these other issues that we mentioned about air pilot training hours, those need to get settled as well before we have sort of true clarity. But I do feel confident that given all the work that we and our members in MWA and you all have done in May and June and July, we laid really strong groundwork for convincing people that DCA is at capacity, that adding flights will have a negative effect, not just as a local issue, but really as a national issue in various markets, maybe affecting different states and airports in different ways. And that doesn't change. So I think that all the hard work, we as a coalition really thank all of our members who reached out and who worked on this issue, because I think we have laid a really strong foundation that if reauthorization gets kicked 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is, we are trusted as a voice that has good data and good information that is important to members. So I'll stop there, hand it over to David, or answer any questions that folks have, but I appreciate you listening to me go on for a bit.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. Before we open up for questions, I want to provide David Mould an opportunity to give his thoughts on the MLAW perspective, and then we'll open it up after. And David, we'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you much, Scott. Let me do the click and make sure people can see my screen. So hopefully my slides are up there.
Yeah, and the slot is too.
Okay, so thank you, Scott and Adam. As Adam said, on July 19th, we got a pretty good victory in the House with that vote. But the Senate action is still pending, so we're ahead at halftime. I guess we have to start using football analogies since Tom Brady's now working for Delta. But anyway, a lot of this that I'm going to zoom through pretty quickly here is very familiar to most of the people on this call, so I won't belabor it. You've heard it from Jack, you've heard it from Richard Golanowski, you've heard it from Mike Stewart before him. So slot and perimeter rules that have been around, I think as everybody knows, since the 1960s, basically keeps our two airport system in balance. That's operational balance as well as financial balance. Manages congestion, balances the operations of the two airports, makes sure we're using our assets as they should be used, and protects little DCA from overcrowding, delays, inconvenience, and stress on the airport facilities, more so than they're currently experiencing. And another thing it does is provides regulatory certainty for the airlines and their investments, which is very important. So beyond perimeter flights, which I think is the end game for much of this, these beyond perimeter flights generally use bigger, heavier, and louder planes, and because of their flight time, they take off early in the mornings, they come in late at night, which is the problem area for our noise constituents. And bringing all these extra flights in there will certainly exacerbate the crowding problems at DCA right now. So, since this is the committee for Dulles, I'll remind everybody that perimeter exemptions certainly disrupt Dulles. I'll take you back to 2014 when the task force and the committee for Dulles were working on the Dulles Matters series of meetings. I think everybody remembers those, and thanks to a lot of people on this call who were instrumental in that. But you might remember from back then, Dulles was having problems. The flights were moving from Dulles to DCA. Costs at Dulles were going up because of that. Carriers were going away. Destinations were going away. There were calls from Wall Street for United to just close down its Dulles hub because it was losing money or not making much money. Loss of domestic connections discourages all the other foreign airlines we've got in there because they need connections. Only about half of their passengers are coming to Washington. The rest of them are connecting and going somewhere else. So these airlines could go to other airports with better connections if they needed to. So that was also a problem. And also there was the ding on the major economic contribution that these airports make, which is around 200,000 jobs, about $23 billion in economic activity. So you remember after the Dulles Matters series, we got together and did a lot of things and a lot of work to fix this problem and get Dulles back on track. We established the revenue office. We sold off the Western lands. We had a very sharp focus on non-airline revenue growth. We watched our budgets, and we finally got the problem fixed. But it took about 5 years, and if this happens again, and as many flights at DCA as you're hearing about now could certainly cause it, we'd be right back in the same boat, and all the innovations that we used to fix the problem last time are now gone. So, it's more critical than ever not to put Dulles back in this situation. So the current attacks on the perimeter, it does threaten the airport balance. You can see the list of things. I I won't read all of those, but you know the opposing coalition is spreading a lot of misinformation. They're touting their consulting firm report, which has got some misleading stuff in it. And in fact, you might recall that a memo from the FAA back in May called the study flawed because it did not consider the physical constraints at DCA. So as last time, our regional congressional delegation, that's DC, Maryland, Virginia, as well as West Virginia, are firmly united against these changes, as are the main carriers at each airport, United and American, along with many of you folks on the call here. So, you know, the local leadership has been instrumental in that. Some of the reasons that we are using is, you know, runway 119 at DCA is indeed the busiest runway in America, and it's the only major U.S. airport with only one main runway, and it's a very short runway by industry standards. So this message has resonated a good bit.
David, can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure, Scott.
You know, I've used the term that DCA has one runway and it's the busiest in America, and and Adam said kind of the same thing today in his presentation. But in reality, does not DCA have 3 runways?
Well, DCA has, you know, the main runway is very, very short. The secondary runway, which gets about less than 10% usage by all the flights because, you know, a lot of planes are just too big to use it. And then we've got a third one that's shorter still. It was pretty busy back when there was a lot of general aviation activity pre-9/11, but since that's gone away, that runway is kind of fallen into disuse. Plus, a large building at the new Virginia Tech campus to serve Amazon is there's an 11-story building right in the middle of the flight path at the end of this runway. So that's going to limit its use in the future also. So for all practical purposes, we got one runway at DCA, and it's a short one.
Runway one right. Say that 3 times real fast.
And that was my reply to the guy who questioned me when I used that term, one runway. So
Yeah. You know, we also on this slide you're looking at right now, DCA is far and away the smallest of the 3 Washington area airports, and it's got the most passengers. At the end of 2022, DCA had 24 million passengers per year, followed by Baltimore at 22.8, followed by Dulles at 21.4. And you hear the proponents of more flights at DCA saying, you know, there's plenty of room, plenty of capacity. So look at this picture over at the right. This is an aerial photo of Dulles, but superimposed in black and white in between the 2 north-south runways, you see, that's the entire DCA campus, and that map is to scale. So you can put all of DCA in between 2 of Dulles' runways.
that's a good graphic.
So
Yeah, we used to have one that put it between the main terminal and the midfields, you know, the same thing. But just, hey, David, on the runways, I just looked it up to confirm. Basically, the, you know, 119 is 7,169 feet, which is damn small for an air carrier runway.
Yep.
Then, you know, 3315 is 5,200 feet, which is a GA runway. And then the shortest one is 5,000 feet, which is 2204. And, you know, it's just, in essence, like, I mean, yeah, they've got 3 hunks of concrete down there, but really only one that's usable, and that is damn small.
I was wondering, has there been any discussion or of decommissioning the smallest runway, 422? Because the alternate use could be more parking for aircraft and also for passengers.
well, we do park aircraft on it right now.
Yeah.
We don't have as many as we used to since the GA traffic is down. Used to be pre-9/11. You remember when there was something like an inauguration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had runways at both airports that were transformed into parking lots for all these private planes coming in. So on the next slide here, this is basically the impact of more flights, what it would do to DCA. It's already crowded. You can see the bullet points down there. I I won't rattle them off. I think everybody can read them pretty much. But the bottom line is the place is already packed. Do you really want to make it worse? So our position, of course, is to keep the rules intact for all the reasons that we have just gone over. It would cause flights to shift from Dulles to DCA, which causes problems at both airports. You know, all these inside perimeter flights, which Adam talked about. You know, you'll hear from the opposing coalition, well, there's plenty of room. You know, the flights aren't in danger. But if an airline can suddenly start flying to Los Angeles rather than Akron, and they have to pick one or the other, what do you think they're going to do? So this is why some of these smaller airports are joining with the coalition, and we are pleased about that. We estimated that if these new slots are added, you would get between 2.6 and 3.9 more passengers a year at DCA, and so we think that really that really reflects the balance issue that we're talking about. So no, DCA is not open for more flights because you just can't fit any more in there. And you know, we've had a lot of strong regional support. You can see the nice editorial in the Post and the statement at the right there from the CEOs of the major airlines. So you know, our position is held by other airports and by most other airlines. So we feel good about that. And I said earlier there was a lot of misinformation. Here are a few of the things that we have had to deal with. You know, I'll go through some of those because you hear them in all these letters and op-eds and TV interviews and all these other things that are going on. You know, we just had the big Project Journey improvements at DCA, and you know our opponents say, oh well, that's added more capacity. Well, no, it has not. It has replaced 14 outdoor boarding areas, which was really a pain for passengers out in the weather, particularly if they had any sort of disability. And the same number of flights, same number of slots, same number of gates. They're just inside now instead of outside. So that myth is just that, a myth. Adding slots would increase competition. Well, all the major U.S. airlines plus Air Canada are already at DCA. The only ones that aren't are, you know, little airlines like Breeze, and you know, we certainly welcome anybody that there's room for, but right now there's no room. So we've got almost 420 daily departures to about 110 destinations from DCA. So, you know, that's pretty good numbers for an underutilized airport, wouldn't you think? The other one that we find kind of amusing is they keep saying adding flights at DCA will lower ticket prices. Well, how do you do that? You've got a limited supply here in the number of slots. You're going to increase the demand, and that's going to bring the price down. And plus, you know, all these extra passengers are going to require a lot of upgrades: the baggage system, the roadways, the parking areas, the terminals, and all the other facilities. And all those things cost money. And if you know how airports are financed, those things are passed along to the passengers by the airlines through higher ticket prices. So it won't lower ticket prices. It'll probably raise them. You know, the other thing is DC has more capacity for flights. So the other guys will find maybe a spot where all the slots are not utilized every now and then during the day. And then you've got the whole middle of the night that there aren't many. But you need these extra gaps during the day that we have now, and there aren't many, to catch up from delays. As Adam pointed out, we are already at DCA one of the more delay-prone airports in the country, and the FAA says these flights will increase it by 20 to 30%, you know, more delays, which was, you know, not in the best interest of the passengers. And so you need these extra flights to catch up because, you know, there's a delay all the time for some reason at airports. And so if you don't have any catch-up time, you know, you're just delayed constantly. So that argument, you know, underutilized. Okay, they've used that word a lot, underutilized. The busiest runway in America with a takeoff or landing every minute during most of the daytime hours. the stressed infrastructure. You've seen all the days when the parking lots fill up, the roads get gridlocked, the lines are long inside the airport. So, you know, we've got the most passengers, even though we're the smallest airport. So underutilized, really. Probably the most ridiculous one is that if you can't have a nonstop flight to DCA, then you're denied access to the nation's capital. You've seen they've had a TV commercial, you know, some school teacher from somewhere can't take her class to Washington because her city doesn't have a direct flight to DCA. Well, we checked, that city's got about 12 flights a day to either Dulles or BWI. So not sure what the school teacher has in mind on that one. So our two larger airports, they have no restrictions on flights. Anybody from anywhere can fly to Baltimore or Dulles, and they would both welcome those new flights because they've got room for them. And you know, the last one, which I saw in a letter to the editor from the head of the opposing coalition just a few weeks ago, implying that adding more flights at DCA, particularly these beyond perimeter flights, would not impact the noise situation. So tell me, please, how more jet engines at an airport results in less noise. I don't get that. But anyway, particularly during the early morning and late night hours when these beyond perimeter flights will operate. So anyway, we've got a lot of work to do with as the Senate action is looming. We don't know exactly what they're going to do yet. They've got a few options that they can follow. They can, I'm sure they'll do some sort of continuance, as Adam said. They can go through all these amendment process. They could just vote on the House bill if they wanted to do that. So no indication as of yet what we're going to do. So, you know, we are ahead at halftime. We got a lot more work to do. We're grateful to the congressional delegation, to the airlines, to everybody in this call for the support, because you understand the economic implications of all this. So thanks to everybody on behalf of the airports and the people in the region we serve. So I'll take any questions you've got.
All right, thank you, David. Appreciate it. And I'll open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have.
David, good morning. This is Rob. What are the per passenger, the enplanement fees at Dulles versus Reagan today? And is, for a couple of years, that you had allowed revenue transfer from DCA to IAD. So can you give us an update on a couple of those?
Well, the revenue transfer, Rob, is a provision of use and lease agreement, which is, I think you know, is drawing to a close over the next couple of years, and we're beginning the process of renegotiating a new one. Mm-hmm. So that's where the transfer comes from. The cost per enplanement is fairly competitive now at both airports. As you know, it was way high at Dulles back in 2014. It was like $27, $28, mm-hmm. and predicted to go toward 30, which I think was the highest in the nation at that point. That was causing a lot of problems. We've gotten it down through all the things that I rattled off earlier, and it's now around the $16, $17 level, which is very good for the airlines. So we are competitive. Also, if you look at all the other airports around the country, the big ones, for these huge construction projects right now, multi-billion dollars, you know, all over the country, and those things, because the way airports are financed, they're going to raise their cost per enplanement. Yep. So that will probably, in relative terms, put us in an even better competitive position overall. But you know, you got to have balanced airports, because if one is just completely overwhelmed and the other one is hurting for business, that's not good for anybody. Did I answer everything, Rob?
I'll wait to see the details from your presentation. Okay. But I guess the question is, the fact that Dulles is still at whatever you said, 21.5 million. Well, so I know international growth has been slower to come back, I mean, what do you see? What have you forecasted for this current fiscal year?
We're probably pretty close to our predictions because we did see the slow international travel recovery because of COVID. We see that still lingering, particularly in the Asian markets, and we also saw the slower growth of business travel versus leisure travel. A lot of people are now combining their business travel with their leisure travel since everybody can work remotely, and a big part of the delay for the recovery of business travel. Number one, they're still trying to catch up with all the money that they lost during the pandemic, and the other thing is technology like we're using right now. A lot of folks are doing that instead of buying airplane tickets to until they can get back on their financial feet from the pandemic. So the recovery is moving along well, probably a little better than we anticipated back during the height of the pandemic. But we're a slow, steady path for recovery. We're getting more airline interest in Dulles, more international carriers are signing on, and that's very, very good. But we've got to keep all these domestic connections at Dulles because that's what's drawing these international airlines in.
Dave, if I could ask you to stop share screen, and that way you guys will be more visible to us.
Yeah, let me. I'm looking for the button, Scott.
Maybe I can.
It's not on my screen. Hang on. Here we go. It was hidden behind something else.
There we
All
go.
right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wanted to. This question is for Adam as the consultant to the coalition. Assuming a successful outcome, what do you see the future of the coalition being? Is it something that you would recommend to be, just dissolved, or do we see it something that we would keep together in case the future need comes back?
It's a good question, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So we're solely focused on this fight right now, but I think it's clear that this is not a fight that's going away. FAA reauthorization happens every 5 years. There are other vehicles. In the past, I know the NDAA bill has been one that folks have used to try to add, riders or amendments to change slot and perimeter rules. I think that even if we get past this FAA reauthorization, the other side is not going to pack up and go home, and that means that we should not pack up and go home. And of course, that will require, the input and partnership with you all and our members over time. But I think we have the ability to scale up and scale down as needed when these fights come. It would be great to be able to use CPARA as the entity that can maybe change minds so that this issue doesn't come up every 5 years. But I'm not so naive to think that the members who really do want to change this policy aren't just going to give up. But what we've put together in these last few months, I think, is sort of the biggest, most sustained argument about why not to change the perimeter rule. And so I think that presents us with an opportunity to continue. There will always be new members of Congress from the perimeter and outside the perimeter states. The education on the issue, while certainly from you all and Emma and others are there to do it. But again, if there's a need for a central voice that can share information that has some sort of slight remove from any one entity having to bear the responsibility to fight the fight, I think CPARA can has that role to play. So unless the other side, goes belly up and decides that, they're not going to ask for any more slots out of DCA, I think CPAR can play that role.
Adam, let me jump in. 46 years, that I've been with the airport and M1. That is hard to believe, 46 years. Mark Treadaway, 30 years. And we were talking just last week, and every 5 years it keeps coming back, and it's a different group, it's a different attack, it's a different angle, and we pull out the same old playbook, and it all works out sort of the same thing. And this is probably the most aggressive effort and organized effort I've seen on the other side. It's also probably the most organized effort I've seen on this side, thanks to Adam and Scott and the rest. And yeah, I agree with you. Put the notebook on the shelf, and in 4.5 years, we're going to be right in the same circle again. Unless, it's just not going to change.
Well, as long as Scott, agrees to serve for another 40 years as our president, I think we'll be good. We're doing 40-year terms now that you.
Yeah, there you go. So. Thank you.
Adam,
Yeah, so he'll be at 50 years by then.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, David.
Let's see. Mike Stewart's on. We have Richard Golanowski on, and Anita. I just wanted to see if the three of them had maybe any questions or thoughts they'd like to chime in on.
I had not so much a policy question, but the coalition that Delta organized, does it have a name and an acronym like CPAR? So if you see it in newspaper articles, and we're trying to write our, in this case at this point, the senators, that we're aware of the information and what, who it's coming from.
Yes, they are the Capital Access Alliance, CAA. I think their website, if you want to see their materials, is capitalaccessalliance.com. They are made their presence known. They have, from the very beginning, from about early May, I think it was, have been on a sort of proactive texting campaign, I think, for people who sort of fly in and out of DC and around the Hill, and like us, using paid media, sponsorships of highly read newsletters on the Hill. They've made some videos that they've promoted, linked on YouTube. So they're using all the sort of tools that they have, and we're using the ones that we have as a counter. But CAA is the other group, and what they will decide to do, post a strong vote. At least what I can say is their statement after the House vote was that they plan on continuing their work. Even though they lost that amendment vote, they, on their side see, bipartisan group of House members who did support their side, and, have supporters in the Senate, just as we do. So certainly in the short term, this is still going to be a fight, even as we move past FAA reauthorization.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nita. Mike.
Thank you for linking us up. A few technical issues here this morning, but appreciate the update, Adam and David. And I guess going back to the core issue here, which is FAA reauthorization in addition to the slots perimeter, is what could we do, or do we have any plans to help maybe spur the Senate a little bit when we're in a good position and winning at halftime? Any ideas how we get the second half started?
Well,
David, do you want to take that?
Sure, it's off to a pretty good start right now. I think a lot of people saw the recent letter signed by the four senators from Maryland and Virginia, sort of reiterating their opposition to adding more flights at DCA. You've seen a few op-eds, letters, and all this stuff from both sides of this argument. The opposing coalition seems to be on a state-by-state campaign now. We'll see op-eds in papers one day in Ohio or North Carolina or someplace else where they have found somebody to put their name on the article that basically implies that, as long as this slot perimeter rule stays in place, nobody can fly to Washington, and the traveling public just continues to suffer. And so, they're going to be the nation's hero and stop all that foolishness and, put twice as many flights into DCA as it can hold, and that'll fix everything. So, we're mainly watching for this stuff and pointing out, the ludicrous nature of their claims. But we are in fairly close touch with the folks on the Hill, as I think the airlines are. I know the coalition is as well. So it's, people are pretty much divided up. We've got Ted Cruz as ranking member of the Commerce Committee, who is a leading proponent of adding slots. His numbers have come down a good bit, but I think he's still, the last rumor we heard, trying to get 4 more flights into the text of this bill. And, we're going to continue fighting that because, you crack the door open, it's easier to open all the way. So we're going to all continue to work it. And I know a lot of you folks are with your connections and everything. So it's truly a team effort here, and we appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I want to echo a little bit of what was said earlier. I think this has been an age-old issue. It's not going to go away. And I think this is the strongest grassroots effort that we've put together on both sides, but to Keith's point, but especially on this side. And I think we find ways to keep this coalition active. But I do want to, and I don't know if Tony's on or not, but Adam, I think I can speak for Tony. Tony and I both voted for at least 40 years for Scott as president.
Well, as president, I think you can rope in you and Tony then for 4-year terms as well. So you got to be careful.
Hey, Mike, I know a good psychiatrist for you if you believe that. Richard, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo everything that everybody said, including Mike. This is, like Keith said, this has been an age-old issue, and we've been fighting it for a long time. I've been with the authority for almost 30 years now, and it comes up all the time. So, thank you to everybody. Thank you to the task force, and thank you to Committee for Dollars for carrying the water on this to a great degree. And I think even when we're all gone 30 years from now, they're still going to be fighting the same issue. So thank you all. Thank you all.
David, do you have any sense of which senators, I guess you have some who are safely in our camp, some who are in the other camp, and there may be some swing. Who are the senators who need to be most contacted, and do you have their legislative assistants' names?
We're working it. I mean, it's a close vote. We think, most of the senators most strongly on the other side, interestingly enough, represent states that contain Delta hubs.
What a shock. What a shock.
How about that?
David, I think the biggest problem is you guys built Project Journey and took the mosh pit out. Everybody loved the mosh pit so much that, now you've got all this extra room there, right?
That's it. That's it. Come on out this afternoon. Plenty of room.
I hear you. Just don't get on the roadways.
All right, folks.
If you're going to do that, you should probably reserve your parking.
Exactly. No, it's a shame.
Well, I want to thank everybody, particularly Adam and David for being on with us this morning to give us the briefing, and then to the rest of you for coming. We are at the we're past the bewitching hour for us this morning, and good discussion, and I think we'll be successful at the end of the day. We just need to keep pressing forward and making sure. So in my asking about what the future of the coalition is, wasn't really about shutting us down, because I think the need is there, and it makes all the logical sense to keep it going afterwards, even if all we do is get together once a year to do what we need to do as an organization. But it needs to be there, ready to go when the need is there. So with that, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thanks to all. Great locker room discussion at halftime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good analogy. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.